Hey guys, welcome back to the Mind Body broadcast with Austin and Marty, and today we're going to do a Q&A episode. So for those of you that submitted questions, thank you. We appreciate it. I was telling Marty before the show, we have this is like the oddest Q&A I've probably ever seen. We have some cool questions though. They're not super weird, but they're definitely different. They're non-typical, so I think it'll be fun.
Well, if we're anything, it's non-typical. So hopefully this goes with our agenda here, right? So.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you. Speaking of which, we did drop that episode on the relationships and kind of talking about that, and that I actually got a lot of feedback on that. I wasn't sure. I figured it would go over well, but I hadn't really heard a podcast dedicated towards that topic, so that's cool to see.
Yeah, let alone one that can kind of tie it into not only like relationships with food, but relationships with others within the fitness community and how to kind of run your family stuff or whatever. So that was I thought that was really, really cool feedback I got too. So it's great to see that there's not just people looking for just the numbers and the food, but they're looking for how to kind of manage everything else too, which is a great shift that I think was kind of greatly needed to be seen in kind of what our industry is kind of heading towards.
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of one of those things where it doesn't matter how sound your nutrition training, supplementation, all that stuff is. I mean, you're not going to succeed if you have all those other demons all the time. It's just not going to, it's not going to work very long for you. So
no, for sure.
Unfortunately, that is a deterrent for a lot of people, but we will go ahead and I have the questions pulled up, so we'll go ahead and jump into them.
Yeah, buddy.
All right. First one. All right. So what are some things that helps both of you become more objective and less worried about being able to optimize everything in terms of nutrition and training? After hearing the relationship podcast about being more selfless, I was curious on how you guys handle events or situations that are unexpected or might mess up your day.
Ooh, okay.
No, that's fair.
No, that's good. I'll take the first one. So being more objective, I think, will not only come with comes with still experience in terms of just over the years of doing this, but also knowing that it's never really going to be just the minute details. Very rarely will you get a client or yourself be a 100% robot that has no kind of, we'll say, bigger picture factors involved. So you have to remain objective. It kind of has to be kind of one of the first things. I know that anytime I have gone so far under a microscope in terms of, we'll say, something like pre- and post-workout nutrition, which sure has a lot of validity, but if you start focusing so hard on minute factors like that and start missing the bigger picture, such as relationships, such as work, such as sleep, you won't see the progress that you want if the other foundation things are kind of there. I would say if anyone has a problem with going, we'll say, further away from the objective, is just you do have to kind of step back and you almost do have to kind of fail a couple times looking really hard into the minutia. Like he mentioned training and nutrition, and you will, like if you were trying to kind of playing around with, like, maybe if it's 20 or 30 carbs here, or maybe if you're looking at like tweaking a bicep curl but things aren't growing, is that you have to step back and kind of really take a look at that. So it just comes with, I think, would say, with age, and I would say also comes with getting out of the way of yourself. Like the person that asked the question mentioned being selfless, and you have to kind of realize this probably is me and probably not the program or probably not the training. And when I say this has to be me, it could be other factors. Like if you're always in a negative state of mind or a state of heart, we'll call it, then that's going to eat you up way more than not being able to do the one or two reps, we'll say. But here's the trick, is that if everything else is going pretty darn well, you will get the 1 to 2 extra reps. You will be able to adhere to your plan better, and that's kind of some of the keys that I've been noticing that I get older and get more involved into the coaching as well.
Yeah, well, the one thing you pointed out there is interesting, and I wouldn't have told you this 5 years ago or agreed. I probably wouldn't even have agreed 5 years ago because I didn't have quite as much experience. But you can't, it is harder to look at the big picture when you haven't been doing it very long, because you have no grasp of anything other than short term. And I think I feel like that's a reason that some people have a hard time with their first prep, for example, and, and being structured after prep and and staying on track and, blah, 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 blah. Like all that stuff. It's because they just haven't done it before. They have no grasp of it. So yeah, time definitely helps. And then beyond that too, I can definitely comment on this, because I think now at this point, I'm pretty much a bodybuilding hermit as much as they come. I have a gym at my house. I coach at my house. I eat at my house. I everything's here. But with that said, I can't prevent everything from happening. Like, right. I just don't have control over everything. So, there are some things you can do. Always be preparing ahead of times. Little things, like if you think, you pointed out a lot of great stuff in terms of being objective and big picture, but in terms of like actually planning, I tell people real simple stuff. They get frustrated that they go out, let's say they go out and they have errands to run, and it takes them a lot longer than they expected. They miss a meal, right? Well, take an extra meal. If you think that there's any chance that you're going to be gone longer than X amount of hours, take a meal. Worst case scenarios, you don't eat it.
Yeah.
So little stuff like that you can get some experience with and realize, hey, maybe it's just a little extra preparation. I know with a lot of my clients too that have like really crazy schedules, I'll actually set it up to where we have a meal at the end of the day where they're filling in their macros. So even if your day got completely butchered, you could still technically fill it in the last meal.
Yeah.
So, there's little stuff like that you can do. And now with that method, is that necessarily timing your pre, intra, post workout everything perfect? No, it's not.
Yeah.
But in the scope of things, you've accomplished two things by doing that. You've hit your macronutrients for the day and your calories, and two, you haven't stressed the hell out about it because you had a plan, right? Or you had some kind of something. You had something to go by, because it's sometimes that people stress about the details. Like I kind of set details to where I'll give someone as much details as they can handle without it stressing them out, and that's where we stop.
Yes. No, that's perfect. I'll piggyback onto that too. Is that so? You could take that question in a couple other ways there. The second half, which is in the unexpected events, is that we'll say in a day, like as in you had one unexpected event where now there's construction or a car breaks down, pick something, right? And now you can't go to the gym or you can't eat on time. Don't sweat it. Like that I would say that would be the number one killer. Is that you start becoming self-depreciating, or you start getting down on yourself, or you start feeling guilty, is that will do so much more harm than we'll say missing the meal or missing the workout. You got tons of time for the, like, in terms of going forward, in terms of the weeks and the months. Yes, even during a contest prep is like, well, what you probably can echo this too, is that the same thing. The more stressful, the more, let's say you're 4 weeks out or whatever, and your car breaks down and you can't make the gym that day. Like, yeah, that does suck. Is that ideal? No, but what's even more or less ideal is you getting down about it. And like, let's say the worst happens and like you binge or you go off, or you say like, screw this, and you like ditch the whole prep. Like, I know that's an extreme, but I have seen it before, which sucks. But that you just, there's even a book called Don't Sweat the Small Stuff. And then the second part of the book is called And It's All Small Stuff, which it pretty much is. Because we can make mountains out of molehills out of anything, but we can also take something really detrimental, like let's say car blows up entirely, car gets written off, car accident. Well, now that's something huge, but you can do your best to kind of not take away the severity of the situation, but knock it down a bit. And like, life isn't over. And I think that, and that is a skill, and that comes with as you do get older, you can either pick to worry more or worry less about that kind of stuff. And to kind of wrap that up too, is if it is, we'll say, longer than a day, like let's say, I don't know, family member's sick, you have to fly home, something like that. Now you're you're out of your groove for, let's say, 3, 4, 5 days or something along those lines, and that's kind of something you're talking about being unexpected. Is that, just like Austin said, is that you have systems or behaviors or things in place, and you do get better at that the older you get. Like for instance, let's say the car crash happens and you screw it up entirely. Well, next time you're going to know, okay, cool. Like Austin said, you could have a cooler in your car. Let's say the meals survive. Cool. If they don't survive, you can eat later on. Or if you do have the unexpected trip away from home for 3 to 5 days, you go, okay, you know where, you know a meal prep company back home. You know where the local gyms are back home. So you you do your best, and then you just don't sweat it. That would be the biggest key for these unexpected events.
Yeah, I agree. A little bit of experience, a little bit of not sweating the small stuff. It's for sure. We'll move on. That was good. All right, so next one: direct ab training for bikini girls, yay or nay? And if yes, then what type would you stay away from to avoid a blocky waist?
Oh man, I love this question, because you know what, my opinions have changed over the years on this, and not hard, but enough. So you know what though, I'll let you tackle this one first. Go for it.
Okay, cool. Okay, so for one, I'm not completely sold on the idea that just training your abs is going to give you a blocky waist. For most people, now it can definitely happen. I mean, any muscle is going to grow. Your obliques are going to grow, right? You know, they're going to grow outward. It's going to happen. But a lot of people's waist or obliques, for example, will grow just as their body grows, because all muscle is going to grow. It's systemic. But as far as not training your abs, a couple things I'd probably consider. So bikini girls, for example, we're not really crunching down on our abs. They are to some extent. They are a little bit. They're twisting. They're doing the twisting motions. They have to be able to keep their midsections tight. They're not doing an ab thigh pose, for example. Does a bikini competitor need super deep, gnarly abs? I would argue probably not. It's not going to hurt, but I see a lot of high-level bikini girls that don't really have that, so I'm not convinced that really needs to be there. But as far as direct training, yeah, I would definitely consider it if somebody has poor abdominal control, and that's going to go for definitely any class for that matter. In training not only the abdominal wall, but like the transverse abdominis. So training that, being able to hold your stomach in, for example. It's normally not as bad with women as it is men, eating less food and what have you. But what would I stay away from? Well, I don't do. It just depends on development. Like I'm not convinced that you can't train like obliques, for example. If somebody has really smooth, I've had some people that have had just good ab development, and they just have really lack of details in that twisting pose as a female, and it just, something about it just doesn't look right. I want a little bit of oblique in there to pop that line. I want things to be boxed out. I want to maybe see those intercostal muscles and see a little bit more of that going on the side, the detail. So yeah, we'll do some training, direct oblique training. I'm not opposed to it. So again, I think it just kind of depends on development. You have to be able to look at the person and see, do they need this? Or are they just genetically gifted in that area, or are they probably getting enough indirectly from other exercises, so on and so forth. So let's hear it. What you got?
That's you nailed it perfectly. I knew you know what, I didn't know, but I was 85% sure you would echo what I thought, which is great because I don't hear it enough. So I'm glad that we're both going to say it. Is that, yeah, like the whole making you be blocky. I have yet to see someone gain whopping amounts of oblique, popping like out to the side, like as in waist enlargement, whether it's to the front or to the back. And if they do, which is, I don't even know if I can say that I've seen someone that was truly overtraining abs in that way. I would love to see their TVA, their transverse abdominis, and see how well they're training that in coordination with just the rectus abdominis or even their obliques, because you see that time and time again. And I've seen, figure girls, bikini girls, all girls that they just have no control over it. And regardless if they've had, like, we'll say, especially on show day, if they've had food or not food, I've seen like their stomach protrusion. Now, I'm a huge believer, and I'm so happy I found out this stuff about 3 years ago, if not more. But digestion reigns supreme so much with this stuff. Like there are things like SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, that can really affect the look of your abs, which is just you are distended, and it's just because you have, we'll say, inflammation and other things kind of going on, which can make it look like because that you're training your abs too much or whatever. Like you said, it's a little bit more prominent in men, but I've seen it with women too. I've seen bikini girls, especially standing at the podium being a MC for bodybuilding shows and looking over and seeing the girls from like the side, like I'm viewing their side and they're facing the front, and I've seen like stomachs popping out and they just don't have that control, like you said. So things like vacuums are wonderful for that, just being able to kind of start developing that ab control. And then you can even just take stock. Do you get blocky? Like, do you find you get a significant amount of hypertrophy of your rectus abdominis? Like, do you get the ravioli looking six pack or not? And then looking too even harder into your division or your league that you're doing it. Like for some of the natural leagues we have up here in Canada, they want just kind of the flat stomach with we'll say the lines on the side of your abs with no, I call it, visible horizontal definition. Some leagues just don't want that. And if you have to kind of play by their rules. If they don't want the definition, then you can't show up with it. But now there are other leagues that they like their bikini girls being harder. So if that's what they want, then train for that, right? Kind of taking stock, looking at what, especially this is all about if you're a competitor or not, right? But if you look at, we'll say, the top 5 in each one of the bikini categories, and every single one of them have dynamite, fully defined abs and obliques, then that's probably what you're going to have to train for. But then if you're not a competitor, what do you like? Like, do you like having a full-on six-pack? Cool, then train for that. But that's come to kind of go down to personal preference if you're just kind of looking for we'll say, a bikini look. But I also am not in the camp of don't train your abs, or that indirect stuff is all you need. I have seen time and time again where not only myself but girls and guys will both believe that, deadlift, squats, they'll work your abs for you entirely, and they end up getting lower back pain. They end up getting hip flexor pain because there's no preventative exercises being happen to keep the core where it needs to be, or they don't have that, like you said, that ability to control their core when they are training, and so it leads to more injuries. I don't know how many girls I've had to try to just lay on their back and do a reverse crunch for, we'll say, quote unquote, lower abs. I know that's not a thing, but and they'll try to just do like leg lifts, and they'll either be using entirely their hip flexors, or they just will have zero ab strength. I've done this test in person with so many girls, and then the next day after doing, like, we'll say a set of 10 of just like, then they're just shaking, just trying to do a reverse crunch and not using their legs at all. And then they come back, oh my, I'm so sore. It's because they've never been training their abs at all. And so that's something to take a lot of stock into. But also just knowing that, you can get obliques bigger. Like you said, there is hypertrophy potential, but it's just not a lot. It's like, I like to look at them a lot like calves and a lot like forearms, is that you have to really, really try to get your abs to start shoving out to the side to get like an inch on each one side of your obliques, like that. But like good luck with that. You know what I mean? You're going to get more of the tightness and the hardness. And again, if you're starting to see that protrusion on the side of the trunks or of a guy, or side of the, like, pushing out for a female or a guy, I would love to see your TVA. How well are you being able to control that stomach and again digestion? I don't hear that talked about enough. But if I've seen, like, if you were waking up in the morning and you're seeing a little bit of a belly pushing out, even if you've got abs, I would start looking at digestion for sure, because it will push everything out and make it look like you've got that we'll say blocky waist, when really it could just be following all down to digestion.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with everything you said.
Bam!
I'm glad you mentioned the weakness in the core. I think it's hilarious, and people are like, they think that I'm doing all these deadlifts and yada yada yada, and then they get all these back problems. It's like, well, because your abs are weak. Mm-hmm. And it's something so simple,
And there's one further point on that too, is that people say abs, and I'll kind of be one of those assholes that say, actually, you should be saying core, because the lower back is such a damn important part of that. Like, I like doing proper back extensions or proper back hyperextensions. That could be a missing link too. So if you're overtraining your abs and you've got kind of that, let's say, a tilted pelvis or kind of that hunch in your back or whatever, that'll make your abs look more pushed out too than they will be if you've got a strong lower back, keeping the core where it should be, because it's not just all about abs too, because I know so many will love doing their weighted crunches, their side bends or whatever, but they'll completely negate doing any kind of lower back work, and before you know it, then not only do we have problems there, but like it will get that stomach protrusion look or effect.
Yeah, well, balance front to back.
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah. Okay, next one.
Perfect.
All right, so thoughts on stretching and foam rolling. When is an ideal time to do it, if any? And what are your preferred types of stretching? For example, do you like a DC stretch for foam rolling? Helpful or harmful? And thanks, guys. Keep up the kick-ass content.
Woo!
There you go.
That's pretty good. I like that one. Yeah, I was going to say, I'll always give some honey at the end there, and we'll give you some nice detailed answers, right? So.
Yeah. Okay, so I feel like we've talked about this. I think we did do an episode on did we do an episode on warm-ups?
We did warm-ups, and we did one on recovery too, where we talked briefly on stretching and things like that too. But you know what? It's cool. So if people are still asking the questions, it either means A, we didn't do a damn good enough job, or B, we need to talk about it more, right? So go for it.
Yeah, okay. So I have a couple different opinions on the stretching and foam rolling, and I'll lump in some other things like mobility work,
yes,
just flexibility stuff. I'm going to kind of lump a lot of stuff in, but it's kind of an as needed basis. I don't like people to overuse stretching, overuse foam rolling on a regular basis, especially like pre-workout, for example, before you train. I just am not really a fan of it. I think that there could actually be some potential dangers in that. The example that I use a lot is foam rolling, for example. So one misconception about foam rolling is that, I'm breaking up scar tissue, or I'm breaking up knots, or I'm loosening up my fascia. Well, first off, that's not happening.
Thank you so much. Keep going. I was like, please say that. Go for it.
Yeah. The amount of pressure that actually is required to do that is not going to be accomplished with a foam roller. So there's one thing I should mention. And then secondly, common sense would say, at least my logic is that, okay, let's not loosen up an area too much if it's a supporting area for a lift. So for example, if I'm going to squat, I really don't want my lower back to be super loose. Now, I do want to be able to perform a proper range of motion, but I don't want it to be so loose that I'm going to hurt myself. I want to stretch or foam roll or whatever you're doing just enough that I can perform a proper range of motion fully without any issues, without getting hurt. That's essentially what I'm after. So that would be if I were going to do those things pre-workout. Now, post-workout's a little different story. I do like some of the more intense static stretching and stuff post-workout. Now, again, are we really going to tear fascia tissue and really like open that up? Probably not, but it's definitely good for circulation. I mean, if anyone's done, for example, like I'll give you a stretch. You train your arms, you do a hanging dumbbell stretch for your triceps after. You hang the dumbbell behind your back, stretch your tricep. Now, when you release that stretch, you can feel that blood rush into the area. It feels great. You feel the area does feel like you loosened it up. It does feel good, increased circulation. I think the main thing people miss is they probably don't stretch long enough. So I normally suggest holding a stretch for a minimum of 30 seconds if you're going to do any kind of intense static stretching. To really actually alter the tissue in any way, you're probably going to need at least 30 seconds. It's not going to hurt to go longer. So that's why you see, he mentioned DC stretching. Well, DC stretching is normally longer. It's 45, 60 seconds. Some people might even do it longer, and they're doing it weighted. These are intense static stretches that are weighted. So yeah, post workout, I'm totally cool with all that stuff. Now, foam rolling, I don't think it's harmful, especially post workout. Like I don't see any harm in it, or on an off day. If you have an area that's really beat up and tight, you might be able to loosen it up with the foam roller. I'm not going to say you can't, because I have one and I do it every once in a while, and it does feel good. I mean, is it? I don't think it's purely placebo. I mean, I think there's definitely some effect there. It feels good. It loosens up the area. It's gonna be like a poor man's soft tissue work,
right?
Basically, So yeah, that's kind of my take on it. I think that post workout, definitely static. Those more intense static stretches are great. Pre workout, tread that line very carefully if you're going to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, perfect. So there's nothing I disagree with there. So I'll just add on like my other thoughts that I have on it too, and I'll give you a little bit of science behind that too. So I would say the worst possible times to do any kind of static stretching would be first thing in the morning or right before a resistance training session. And so why? There's some you have things called Golgi tendons that kind of tell you when to snap back out of a stretch reflex. Like you come to the bottom of a squat, you're going to have like your hamstrings and your glutes and everything else will kind of work like a spring, kind of like if the old school pinball machines. If you pull back before you let the pinball go, if you kind of pull it back at the right amount and then you let it go, the pinball is going to snap and give you more explosive power, and that's obviously what you want during a weight training session. You want to be able to take advantage of the stretch reflex, we'll call it. But if you do something like a static stretch and you do it for that 30 to 60 seconds at the minimum, kind of like what Austin said, and I agree with that entirely. Like anything less than that, you're not really stretching. You're just kind of doing something to potentially alleviate some kind of pain or whatever. Anyways, so if you stretch, you're teaching and you're showing that Golgi tendon at that moment to relax more. And this can potentially, and I've seen it, will potentially take you past the range of motion. So let's say, for instance, you don't stretch your glutes and you stretch your hamstrings, and now you're coming down in a squat, and now your hamstrings aren't going to say, okay, fire now, when they usually should be, and your glutes are tight or your hip flexors are tight, and so they're going to take more stress, and they're not going to rocket you back up at where they should, and that can lead to actually injury. Whereas what's the whole friggin' goal of static stretching outside of increased flexibility is recovery or anything like that, or injury prevention. But it completely flies in the face of it. And so it's the best analogy I can think of for how to, like, and here it comes, I finally got an analogy going on, Austin. I know I've been slacking the last bit here, but is it's like flat ironing your hair. Let's say your muscles are kind of like crimped hair. And then static stretching is like going it over with a flat iron. And so now what happens when you flat iron or straighten out crimped hair? It will give you an extra inch, 2-3 inches on the hair, depending upon the length of the hair, just like depending upon the length of the muscle. So if you flat iron the hair and you make it longer like that, basically what weight training or even just moving about your day, that's why I said I don't really care much for static stretching in the morning, because as soon as you move about your day or as soon as you use that muscle again, you're going to be effectively recrimping your hair. It's going to go back to more of being more curly, or back to being more like wavy. So you're going to effectively have that shorter length. So it doesn't make sense to flat iron your hair, which is trying to relax the muscle, to try to elongate the muscle, and then try to use it immediately after. Nah, it doesn't make a ton of sense to me. So that's why pre-workout, any kind of ballistic warm-up, which I know we talked about in the warm-up podcast, is much, much better, because that's saying, okay, muscles get ready to be used, and that will effectively too. Let's say you got a tight muscle or something and you're worried about that. Well, doing some kind of ballistic warm, like let's say leg swings, by the time you do front to back leg swings, and if you were to really kind of gauge, we'll say where your toe starts, so you do like 20 leg swings per side, and you gauge how high you can kick. By the end of that 20th swing, you should be kicking a tiny bit higher, and not only is that putting the blood to where the muscle should be, but it's not saying to the Golgi tendon or saying to the muscle, okay, we need to relax, you need to stretch out, we're not going to do much. And not only that, but it will take away from your total power. If you're spending any kind of energy on the stretching, it will in fact take away from your max lifts, or your like a rep or two. And as fitness oriented and physique oriented athletes, that's the whole goal, is you want to be able to not take away energy from something that you're wanting to be putting all your energy to. So that's one there too. Also, and then why pre-bed? Because like I know it's so the two best times in my opinion are post-workout, like Austin said, and then pre-bed. So why pre-bed? I know it's weird, but like we'll say right before bed, if you were to kind of do some hip stretches, especially for problematic areas, so that go back to my analogy of straightening the hair. If you straighten the hair, or you straighten the muscle, you elongate the muscle, and you get into bed and relax. Now it's being able to be taught to stay in that elongated state, and you're not using it and tightening it back up. So that's how you can gain that flexibility component too. If you notice that something is, especially for girls and guys, hip flexors is a problematic one, piriformis is one, glutes is one. So doing that kind of pre-bed will really kind of, we'll say, cascade your, and also will especially for the hips, it will actually be showing, like, you won't be sleeping in a terrible position as much because everything is, your hips aren't being pulled in the direction of where they've been crappy anyways. So for foam rolling, I'm the exact same as you. Like, that's why I burst out laughing, because like it's not being judgmental. It like when I see people doing the foam rolling pre-workout, and especially if they say, you know what, it's been really helping me, it's like, okay, cool, as long as they're not going bananas on it. Or if they, like, same thing like you said, if as long as they don't believe that they're doing some kind of magical myofascial scar tissue treatment, okay, cool. But it's just not the right time. So your classic foam rolling stuff, where it's like you want to roll your quads or whatever, trying to get the put blood in there, recovery or whatever your purpose is. Again, same thing. I would do it pre-bed and I would do it post-workout. And then there is I have a foam roller called the Rumble Roller, which is basically a foam roller with like really friggin' hard spikes. There's two kind of levels to it. There's a blue one, which is kind of the medium, and then there's a black one, which are almost like plastic. And now that I found, especially for the back and for the quads, it will dig in there and it will find your knots, or the technical term is your contractures, and it will be able to help give you that release. It will get on there. So like if you were to do that post-workout, or if you were to do that pre-bed, you'll get in there, you'll release some of these knots that are really binding up your muscles, and that's the best time to it. So like, think about, if you were, like you said, it's a poor man's massage or poor man's muscle treatment. If you would never dream of getting a muscle treatment or like any kind of ART or any kind of muscle therapy and then go right to the gym. That's ridiculous. That's completely counterintuitive to why you go for the muscle therapy or the treatment. So looking into that too can work. And then I think you mentioned too the types of stretching that they do. Like I like PNF stretching, where the proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation, like where like a partner stretching, whereas they would put pressure against you, and you contract the muscle as hard as you can for like 5 to 10 seconds, and you let go, and they can push you kind of a bit further than usual in terms of called partner stretching. Same thing. If you want to do that, post workout is great for that, or even pre bed, as long as you're not completely freezing cold, like as in you've just been sitting around all night. And now you're trying to exert a whole bunch of force on that muscle. But yeah, so that works. Just flat out regular static stretching works. But if you find that you've been stretching and it's not really doing what you want, the number one key thing, and I'm not trying to understate or overstate this here, is just relax during the stretch. A stretch is not you pushing against the muscle as hard as you can. Like for instance, you're doing a chest stretch against like a door jamb or whatever like that. You got your arm up and you're kind of leaning into the stretch. Don't push against that. Relax. If you keep even a slight bit of tension on there, you're basically just trying to do a glorified max rep the entire time. So just relax. And I find something, and like you said, then the number two thing would be just they're not doing it long enough. Doing a 15-second stretch per hamstring is not going to do it at all. So doing that 30 minimum, like I'll even try to say, listen, do 45 seconds as a minimum, because it's just like you got that one friend that's always 15 minutes late. You tell them 30 minutes before when they should be there, so they're 15 minutes early. So yeah, tell them 45 seconds, and then that will start doing some pretty miraculous stuff, especially if you have the tighter muscles there. But yeah, I know that was a little bit long, but that's my take on stretching.
Nope, I like it. I would suggest that the listener or the question submitter go back and listen to that recovery
for sure
/ warm-up episode as well. We talked about some other good stuff like not being hypermobile and things like that, so that would be worth listening to.
Cool.
Okay, next one is, and this cardio question, it looks like, so okay, so if someone is adamant about not doing fasted cardio, when else would you suggest doing it? I'm assuming, okay, so could they do post-workout? Well, I'm assuming they're talking about steady state cardio. So that's it. I mean, that's a pretty easy one. I mean, there's really only one instance by which I would ever really want someone to do fasted steady state cardio, and that's if they're supplementing with something that's going to require them to be fasted to burn off those fatty acids. Like outside of that, it doesn't make any difference. Burn those calories. That's pretty much, whenever. The only thing I would say is probably not going to do. Like I'm not big on someone doing a lot of cardio pre-workout, for example. Taking away from their performance during a session. I know that seems like common logic, but I have had people ask that, like HIIT cardio, for example, and some people will do it, but I think especially in a prep situation or in a fat loss situation where training performance is very, very valuable at that point, I definitely wouldn't be cranking out a bunch of brutal HIIT cardio and then be dead for your weight training session. So, yeah. Yep, that's a pretty easy one.
Yeah, exactly. And I love that you mentioned that too, that like it's the common knowledge thing. And we even talked about that off mic, I think about a month ago, is that people don't either... even fitness people, man, competitors don't fully understand, like we'll say either acronyms, like when I said ART there, that was active release therapy. Sorry for that, guys and girls, but we fall away from the basics, like the amount of people, and that's why I will always ask too on a new client intake is, when do you do your cardio? What type of cardio? Because I want details, right? But the amount of people I know that do cardio as a warm up, which I'm very painfully against. It's just not conducive to the workout at all. More on that later. I think we did that in recovery or the warm up one, so whatever. But it's you have to understand why are you doing the cardio, and so like for if your goal is for fat loss or for cosmetic reasons, putting that before a workout is just like I said about the stretching thing. It's taking directly away from your potential of the workout. Let's say it was you're doing a 20-minute brisk walk, and it really isn't going to do. You're advanced. It's not going to kill you or whatever. But let's say it doesn't take away from the workout. Why even bother giving it the chance when, especially if you are going to be spending the same amount of allotted time at the gym, put it after. Just because then you are not taking away from the whole reason about why you're doing a show or you're interested in muscling up and fat down is to build and maintain the muscle. The cardio is just that. It's the cardio. I call it like the brain dead component of the working out, and where you don't need to focus on things like that. So, like for instance, using your example, Austin, of HIIT cardio, high intensity interval training cardio. And you do that pre-workout. Now, let's say you're fried, you're a little bit tired or whatever, and that's going to take away from not only your mental capacity, but your physical capacity, of course, at the workout. That's the last thing you want. Let's say it takes away 2 or 3 reps per exercise. That's add that up over 12 exercises. We're looking at 24 to whatever, 30, 35 missed reps. I don't want that at all. I don't want to give myself the potential for that. So to go back to the original question again about the fasted cardio, is that fasted cardio is not the holy grail. We've been over this multiple times that everyone thinks it is. I would say over the course of my career, that would be the one thing I believed a little bit too hard in, was that blah, 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 fasted cardio, insulin levels are low, your free fatty acid mobilization is going to be higher. That's been proven to be almost complete and utterly bullcrap for anyone's intensive purposes. It's definitely going to be more of the personal preference thing. I won't get too far into that, but believing, I think the kind of the person asking the question was saying, like, it is like this magical form of cardio when it isn't. It just isn't. But I'm with you, is that I want to see, and it's a rough gauge, but I want to see 5 hours if you're going to do cardio and then you're going to work out. I want to see 5 hours in between the cardio and the workout, which usually gives at least one meal for most people. So, like, let's say you're doing your fasted cardio at 7 in the morning. I don't want to see you doing weights until noon at the earliest. And even then, I would much rather be 8 hours later, so you've got at least 2, if not 3 meals in, so it's not interfering at all with your workout. But yeah, that's kind of my take on it.
Yep, I don't think anything needs added to that really. So we will move on. Okay, next one. Your take on longer versus shorter preps, when each might be advantageous.
Ooh, I love this question.
This is a good one. So I'll let you go. I'll let you take this one first, but we actually did this on another podcast.
Yeah, this is sounding very familiar. Yeah. So
I'm trying to think. I think we had a female guest on, but yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no, that's right. Yeah, exactly. So for this, I would say it also the personal preference would be something there. How you respond to things too. Is it your first show or not? So I do like, and I learned this from Ken Hill, Skip. from a long time ago is for newcomers, I always like a longer prep. Give yourself that 16 to 20 weeks, especially if you don't know how well you respond, especially if you've never been shredded before either. Like when I say shredded, we'll say shredded for your competition in terms of what league or what division you're going to be in. If it's bikini, sure, we'll call it bikini shredded. Bodybuilding, we'll call it bodybuilding shredded. But give yourself more time than not, especially for the first one. Then you'll kind of get to know that stuff in terms of how quickly do you shape up. Do you enjoy mentally a longer prep versus a shorter prep? Like, are you someone that has no problem taking the time? You've got no real big life commitments. You're able to do a 20-week prep, and then two. Like I've of course I've seen 12-week preps. I've done a couple 12-week preps with people. I've done a 9-week prep for someone. I'm not going to get into that, but it does work. And like, so the overstatement of muscle loss is funny enough. I was at a conference, I think about 6 weeks ago, where they dove into some hard science on this, and it's just not there as much as what people think in terms of doing the more aggressive, the quicker preps, saying like, oh, your muscle loss is going to be higher. Not if you're dieting right, not if you're training right, and you're not overdoing the living hell out of things. So that's greatly over exaggerated. But I'm going to go back to the personal preference thing too, and also knowing how quickly you do get in shape for things too. So to go a little bit further outside of the scope of that is, let's say the 20 weeks versus the 12 weeks. Well, an extra 8 weeks of off season could merely make a difference too. So that's something to take stock in. If you haven't been training that long and you haven't had that long of an off season, you really kind of need that recovery time and that growth time, as opposed to switching the boat around and going even to a minor deficit. Minor deficit's still not a surplus, is not going to be gaining any kind of substantial amount of muscle during that time. But yeah, that's kind of my take on it, is that you can do both. It's knowing, like if you're dieting yourself, that's one thing, is being very objective, like kind of like with the first question we had, being very objective with yourself. Can I do this in 12 weeks? Does it freak me out that I only have 12 weeks? Or does it freak me out that I have 20 weeks and that seems too long in my head? So being self-aware on that level, and also if you're using a coach too, if you know that they can get you in shape that quick, in a sense, and if they are not being reckless with your health, which is clearly the biggest concern with these quicker preps, is are you doing something so extreme that now you're running the risk of a health concern, let alone a physical concern. And when I say health, I don't mean just physical; it could be mental health too.
Yeah, I agree. That's a good way to kick this one off. I have a couple things we can add.
Sure.
So I'm gonna basically talk about what we did in that other episode that I mentioned. It wasn't on this podcast. It was with on Joe's podcast. But
okay.
Anyhow,
yep.
So I feel like this is especially true in the natural bodybuilding community, and it got really exaggerated. And I don't know why exactly, but the idea of like longer and longer and longer and longer preps. And there's a lot of top level pros that were doing it very successfully, especially male pro bodybuilders that were doing, we're talking, when I say long, I'm not talking 20 weeks. I'm talking like, 8 months, 10 months, a year. Like they're basically going the whole year.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe this is a US thing. I don't know if you've seen this at all, but I have one issue with that. And I don't think that I think that I get the premise of it. Like, I get the idea is we go slower, there's less chance for muscle loss, which I also agree is overstated, like you said as well. I agree with that. But there's also less chance of, we're in less of a deficit. So we're creating less of a negative metabolic adaptations. Now, my problem with that is, while that sounds really good on paper, I feel like a lot of the time it actually does the opposite. You're in a deficit, even though it's a subtle deficit. You're in a deficit for so long that you're making the adaptations worse.
Yeah.
And I've done this with people too. Like, I've had clients that they're open to anything. You know what? They're ready to go. So we'll just do a dieting phase or a fat loss phase, and let's try it. Let's see how it goes. Let's go super duper slow. Well, I notice two things normally. It can work, and it does work with some people. But if it doesn't work, I normally notice that the changes are so small, the deficit is so subtle, that their body just adapts and like absorbs it. Does that make sense? It doesn't. Their metabolism just inches down a little bit, and then you lower it. And I'm talking small reductions. So that means we're only lowering calories by, I don't know, 75 calories or 100, something very, very small. Their body their metabolism just slows down a little bit, and then it slows down a little more the next time, and then it slows down a little more the next time. So essentially we've gone nowhere, and we've lowered calories, we've now lowered calories 800 per day. And for a lot of people, especially like a female, that's going to be a lot. That's a lot. You know what I mean? So I'm just not convinced that the super long prep is really good for everyone. Now, I have had success doing it with people where we'll do it in spurts. Like we'll do a more moderate prep, and then we'll do like a diet break. You know what I mean? Yep. We'll insert diet breaks in there. And this is if someone has zero timeline and they're cool with doing a week diet break. We might do a 30-week prep, but we're going to do 3 to 4 diet breaks in there.
Yep.
Yeah. And like that has worked well for me, depending on time frame. But to say that everybody should be doing these ridiculously long preps to get shredded is I'm just not completely sold on it. I think that for some people, like I said, it just creates more adaptions.
Yeah.
So I guess you need to really know the person. Yeah, that's it. That's all I got on that one.
The quick additions to that too is that you would have probably really loved. I'll see if I can grab the slides from it, but there is now harder evidence, like straight up studies showing that exactly what you said is true. Is that the adaptions happen so quickly if they're so subtle that they don't really do that much. So something like adding in, like, let's say 5 minutes of cardio to your already 30 minutes of cardio. So now you're doing 35 minutes. So you're only adding 15 minutes per weekend. That's not enough in the body, especially women. And this isn't just opinion either. This is science. Is that women especially will adapt to something like that, the cardio, much quicker. And so that then you have to keep going with, keep adding these changes in. Whereas now, if you did the 20-week prep per se, now you're at 12 weeks out, and like you said, we've effectively done nothing. Whereas if we were to start a little bit more aggressive, I don't mean like a friggin' 1,000 calorie per day / crash, but doing it more aggressively, not only that, will you see the changes quicker in the person, but that will motivate them. Right? Because if you're seeing things too slow, even the most trained coach can't see like a 1 pound difference over, let's say 1 pound fat difference over 3 weeks. That's not enough. So, and then you are effectively turning yourself into that panic mode. So, if anything, like for the let's say the longer preps, you can start out pretty darn aggressive, not maybe as aggressive as if you were only give yourself 10 to 12 weeks, but start out aggressive, and then like you said, you can back off. You start getting results like too quickly. Heaven forbid they be too friggin' quick. But then you can back off, do that full diet break, start implementing some refeeds, and then you're ready early. And oh no, heaven forbid you're ready early. Same thing, right? Like that's the dream. So I completely agree with that. And like there's science behind that, those adaptation things that are just out there that is so friggin' cool. But taking that mental stock, I think, is one thing that's greatly ignored too. Is that, like, if let's say you're in the first month of prep, first 4 weeks, and you see almost no changes, that's so demotivating. So yeah,
it is. It definitely is. And I know that I've kind of come to that conclusion too, in terms of the adaptions, and especially because of my own body, that I'm one of those people that adapts super hard. I know for me, like I've done the super duper long preps, and it adds no benefit.
Mm-hmm.
None. So, yeah, so it could work. It's context, just like anything else.
Yep.
All right, here's an interesting question. All right, so if I am a coach, I am currently pursuing coaching full time. I just transitioned, and I am looking for some advice on tax write-offs.
Ooh.
Okay. There you go.
Yep.
So I don't know how applicable this is to you guys, because I'm not really sure exactly how your tax system works.
Sure.
But
yep.
I'm not even sure where the person's from, but I can on the U.S. side of things, I would definitely, I don't know. Personally, I would get an accountant. Mm-hmm. I would have a certified public accountant, a CPA, and you're still going to have to do a little bit on the back end and yourself, but this ensures that everything's going to be correct. Now, for me personally, what I do is I keep an Excel spreadsheet and I have categories. So we're allowed to, in the US, we can write off mileage for gas expense. We can write off food. We can write off a percentage of our home utilities if we're coaching from home. And then we can write off basically any travel or miscellaneous expense that was used or occurred during business. So essentially that's everything. Yeah. Basically, because a coach is always doing something, it seems like. So I mean, if you really are good and diligent about keeping your receipts and tracking that stuff, I mean, you can essentially write off damn near anything. And if you have a good accountant, they're going to be able to tell you, yeah, this is good. No, that's not good, to keep you out of trouble.
Yeah.
So that's my suggestion. I've never had any issues, knock on wood, but I also have a good accountant. I do pay for it, so I would suggest doing that. And if you're not, I'm surprised like how many people I talk to about that, and they're like, oh, I'm just not very good at it. I don't really write anything off. I'm like, dude, I had like freaking $50,000 in write-offs last year.
Yeah.
I'm like, how could you write nothing off? Like, and I understand not everyone is like, I'm having some big ones this year. Like I went to England and I'm going
exactly
across the country, like stuff like that. You are missing thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure. What's the situation like there?
Sure. So we'll call it the Canadian intake here, or sorry, the Canadian part of it is looking to sole proprietor versus being a company. I remember my accountant. Hi, Kate. You have made me unbelievably happy. You're never ever losing me as a client. She's incredible. She's a like I said, a CPA and a chartered accountant herself. Is that she's invaluable to me, right? I forget what the old quote is, but something like you need the three people in your life to keep closest to you and the happiest is like your lawyer, your accountant, and I forget, maybe financial planner or something like that, or your investment guy. Like, and I completely agree with that. Is that she's saved me more than enough times because I don't want to deal with that stuff, and I it's one of those things that I don't want to possibly have the government that come after. So here it's CRA, Canadian Revenue Agency, would be our equivalent of the IRS, I believe. But just, you don't want to have them coming looking at you. Being audited sucks, let alone having to go back and pay for things that you shouldn't have claimed. And so what she's always told me to, and she's really by the book, which I love, is that, so like for instance, I'm only allowed to do 2 trips a year, which are like, let's say if they're, like for your England one, like that would be two of those per year, unless I was to really shift the scope of my business to be more of a speaker or a presenter, then okay, cool, we'd look into more of that too. But it's just always be on the damn safe side of things. So like I have my phone bills that are all completely written off because of obvious reasons. My phone is, not only do I answer emails, but texts and whatever else. So that's one thing. I could now, because now that I am entirely online, which is something to see too, like, are you a personal trainer at a gym, or are you entirely online and you're at your home office? Is that now I can claim my home office based upon the square footage, so I can do some rent can be claimed there too. I could do travel expensive things like that, like the kilometers, like you said. It's just, for me, I don't do that enough to need that. So like, sure, if let's say if I traveled and checked out someone's posing 20 minutes away, I could really do that, but that I don't really kind of dip into, because that is a lot more effort and a little bit more hassle on my end. So that's cool. But for instance, I got a new laptop, I think last year, because my other one crapped out. That was a business expense, and I know that she said I was allowed to claim, I think 60 or 70%. I'm just throwing numbers out here, but that stuff I don't know, and that stuff I don't care to look up. She knows that for me, so I just tell her, say, hey, I bought a laptop. I got some fitness clothing. I went out. I took a client out for food here. And like, and it's not. And the way to lose at this, I know this might be a little bit too much info on this question, but the way to lose at that is if all of a sudden you're taking your friends out and now you're trying to say that was a fitness seminar. Don't do that. Like at all, like, you know what I mean? Like, because I know, especially up here in the oil field, I know guys will like say, take out a client. Wait, it's not a client, it's their buddy, and to say that was a business write-off or whatever. That's how to have yourself be looked at a lot. Like, let's say you have 52 weeks out of the year, you have 70 business lunches. Okay, 100 business lunches. Okay, like it's that's kind of where to draw the line, or kind of look at things like that. But yeah, you definitely look into it. Like I think there was one year I had like 50, 60, 70,000 dollars of write off stuff, like which basically was my entire income. Why? Because it was all a setup. Like back when I was still personal training, like I obviously wrote off my rent that I was paying to the gym, any clothing that I had that I was wearing in the gym as like my company, that was all written off. Anything that I give away to my clients, like I've got robes that I'll give to my girls for their competition, that's all a write off stuff. So like just, yeah, I know we've said this 1,000 times already, but I'll echo Austin again, is get a really damn good accountant and work with them and just be frigging honest. Don't be underhanded and sneaky, because you don't want to get looked at.
Yep, I agree. I think that's good policy. Just be on the safe side.
Yep, for sure.
Okay. Now, this next one, I'll let you answer, because I have some insight on it, because I do have Canadian clients, but I feel it's appropriate that you answer it.
Sure.
So they asked about getting lab work done in Canada. Now, here we have a lot, well, not a lot, but we have at least a handful of private options. You go online, you order the labs you want, you print it out, you go in, you get it. Now, obviously, we can also go through our physicians, endocrinologists, whatever. But we have the option to basically, in 48, I believe it's 48 or 47 of the 50 states, I could be off by one or two, you're able to do it. Now, your healthcare system's different than ours. So do you guys have, that's what they're asking, do you guys have a private option where you can do that?
Kind of, but not really, because there are still private practices here that can go and get the blood work done. For instance, I had my hormone replacement guy. He was out of the place where I was living, so he was still working out of a different clinic. So I did have to go and pay to see him or whatever. But so he was more inclined to do the testing for me. But still, he was still just a GP with an interest in hormone optimization, we'll call it. So, and he would get anything I wanted checked as long as it was relevant, right? I know that there was some things that we checked for that sometimes they won't allow you to in Canada, unless like you have a serious problem, like if you have AIDS or a potential for cancer or something, then they will be able to say yes or no to certain things. But the biggest problem that I see in Canada currently is just GPs saying no. Like, let's say if you want your testosterone, your estrogen, your whatever checked, anything checked, they'll say no, and there's no probable cause for it, where they are allowed to do that. Like any GP can check off anything for a requisite if there is you have a what do you call it, a concern. Like they are allowed to do that. So I've had more than enough people that say, hey, my doctor won't allow this. I'll say go to a walk-in clinic or keep trying around. Like some locally here in Alberta, I know enough people that I can say this doctor is more progressive, is the term I like to use. It's always free. There's never someone that you have to go pay to go do it. Like you can, like as in when I used Dr. Steern there, I did go pay to get things a little bit more expedited, but also have things go over with me a little bit more in depth. But so for I'm not too familiar with the privatized options here. I know they are here, but you don't need it. So like whereas down there, like you said, you can print off things and send it away for blood work there. I don't believe we have that in Canada. I was just talking to one of my fitness buddies here, and he will send his blood work to the States. I believe he sends it to Tampa to get the more testing done here. Even though he is Canadian, he used to live in the States for a bit there, so he still does that too to get more of a comprehensive report. But the kind of the guidelines in Canada of how to ensure that you're getting things what you want done without having to seek out a private option is keep searching around for a doc that will get the blood work done, and then always get them to follow up. They have a really bad tendency here in Canada that if nothing looks quote unquote wrong, they won't call you for a go over. But you are allowed that. You are entitled to that, to just call in and say, hey, I want to have someone go over it with me. I've had some clients get their blood work emailed to them. Some say that's not allowed, whereas of course it's allowed, or else my clients wouldn't have been given those emails from those doctors around here. At the bare minimum, you can go in. The doctor will print off a copy of it for you that you can go over with them and then take for your own files, and then just take a picture or scan it if you're still into that, and then keep that for your records. But just knowing where your levels are, whether they're in range or not, and then see if they go up or down based upon timing after a prep, before prep, enhanced or not kind of thing, but just, yeah, so, you don't need, I know I keep stressing this, you don't need to pay for anything, and it is covered within our healthcare. So yeah, just kind of following those practices and keep shopping around and find a doctor that'll work with you.
Yeah, that's it. It's similar here. I mean, as far as the shopping around goes, because the thing is, I mean, let's say even if you read your labs, like that's great. I have people that I do consultations all the time, and I get labs, and anything that we can correct with over-the-counter supplementation and lifestyle, that's fantastic. I can't prescribe medication.
Sure, that's right.
You know what I mean? So I mean, you still have to have a doctor that's going to be willing to work with you. So I still think it's a decent idea to at least have a good physician that even if they're not like the super duper knowledgeable, and they're not like the upper echelon, like your Dr. Serrano's or something that's like I'm lucky enough to go see. They're at least flexible, like they're at least willing to listen to you. That's right. And work with you. So if you are an educated individual and you go in and you present something, they'll talk to you about it, and you can solve the problem. So that's it. That's our last question. I actually thought there was one more, but that was it.
Jeez, man, that's perfect because we're bang on an hour and 35 seconds. So that's perfect.
I see your message.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, there we go.
Well, yeah, I like that one a lot. That was great questions, ladies and gents. So, yeah, we'll obviously keep up on these here. We'll try to implement them more and more, especially if everyone's kind of getting good feedback about them and enjoy some of the answers, whether or not they do or not. And then, as Austin and I were talking about, feel free to comment on follow-up to this, too. If you felt that we either didn't answer a question fully or that you want to know more about that, or now listening to the question and the answer, you came up with another question along the same lines, of course, fire them off. I know Austin's really good at putting up things on Facebook and Instagram to get more questions, but you don't need to wait for that to come up. If you've got a question, by all means, fire it off, and we can keep a list of them there, because that's the best way to get more topics for the podcast is from you guys, right? Because if we're not talking about things that you want to know about, we'll do it for sure.
Yeah, that's kind of the point. We don't want to talk about a bunch of stuff you guys don't care about.
That's right. Well, either that or we'll just force you to care. So, whatever. Okay, from Austin and Marty here at the Mind Body Broadcast, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.